Welcome to the Elevate podcast. This series focuses on elevating and inspiring women and girls into or to remain in the tech sector from the classroom to the boardroom. I'm Kelly Kwarteng, founder and CEO of Helzac and host of the show. Thanks for joining us today on the Elevate podcast series. I'd like to introduce you to Irina Stanescu. Irina will be sharing her journey and experience within the tech industry over the past 14 years, and we will dive into the importance of personal investment and the role of a coach or mentor. Irina is an engineering leader, leadership coach and writer, having worked as a software engineer, tech lead and engineering manager for well-known companies such as Google and Uber. After experiencing big tech, Irina decided to dip her toe in the startup world by joining her current company, Mnemonic, a pre-Series A blockchain data insight startup where she gets to wear the multiple hats to build the product and engineering culture from the ground up. Irina, originally from Romania, now lives in San Francisco, California, fueled by great passion for growth and developing people. In addition to her job, Irina coaches budding engineers on leadership skills and writes about the tech culture and leadership for her Substack newsletter, Musings of a Caring Techie. Check out the link on the sign up. In her spare time, Irina is a cat mom and loves reading and dancing. So great to have you on the podcast today, Irina. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. So if it's okay with you, we'll just jump straight in and get started.
Sure. Thanks for having me. This is an honor.
Let's start at the beginning then. So what actually inspired you to take that degree in computer engineering back at the start of your journey?
Sure. So I did my undergrad in Romania, and for a bit of context, the school system is a little different in the sense that it makes you choose your degree basically when you apply for that school. So that's a little different than the system in the US or other parts of the world. So basically for me, the decision has been made in 12th grade. And it was kind of a no-brainer because I knew I loved programming. So I actually went to a computer science high school. So I started programming in 9th grade, which I did the math, it's over 20 years ago. Kind of crazy.
Wow.
But I knew I loved programming. I knew I loved working in teams, and I knew I liked building things. That's as much as you can get from a 12th grader in terms of choosing their, career trajectory, having fun. And I thought it would be a great precursor for a sustainable career. So, yeah. I would also say that I come from a family of engineers. So my mom is an engineer, my dad is an engineer. But, I've always had my mom as a role model. So she was definitely my inspiration. And I kind of want to be like her. I was warned, though, that the program that I was going to go for was one of the hardest in the country and that I basically wouldn't have any spare time during the 4 years of college. But I enjoyed it so much that I graduated top 3%. So it was great.
Wow, that's really impressive, top 3% in your course. I think what's really interesting there that you've shared is how early on in Romania that you had that insight and that inspiration to go into an engineering background. I'm sure, just like you said, your mum being an inspiration, your dad being in engineering as well has helped. But the fact that early on, being a woman within the tech field, having that ability to have that insight is really impressive. And I'm sure there's many other engineers that have come out of Romania as well, by the sounds of things, if that's the early education and things that are being pushed within the country. I suppose in terms of the next question then that I've got for you is for other women that are in the early part of their career journey, and if you think back to when you first started out in your journey and I suppose in your education as well, how did you find the course? And is there any advice that you could give to other women coming through? And the reason I ask this question is that a recent report shared by Accenture showed that, with only 25% of tech graduates being women, and that these courses have one of the highest dropout rates, and the dropout rates for tech courses being at 37%. So obviously we're getting an okay number throughput of people or women looking to enter the field of tech at that education, kind of the degree phase. But that dropout rate is obviously reducing that number, which in effect is that kind of spiral effect as to why the numbers and closing that gender gap is going to be ever impossible to keep moving forward. So any advice that you would give to any budding women in tech that are coming through, girls that are potentially looking to go down that route, on how you found your course and just tips that you might give them?
Sure. So just as a disclaimer, I always cared about my grades. So I was always also looking for like, what is the most prestigious school? Like, where are all the smart kids going and things like that. So in my year, actually, there were definitely more men than women, but not just that. On top of it, most of them were so smart. Like, think international medalists for like informatics, mathematics, physics. I was really intimidated. Not gonna lie, I was really intimidated. That's what I also learned what imposter syndrome was, because it was going really strong. But I think that I had some mindset changes that happened throughout. I think the first year was very important for me. From being intimidated by them, I learned that they're people just like me and that I can actually make friends with them. And then I kept telling myself, there's nothing that these people can do that I cannot do. There's nothing that makes me different from these people in the sense of what I can do. Sure, we're different people, different genders, different backgrounds, different everything, but I can do whatever they can do. So I just kind of kept repeating myself this like a mantra almost. I don't want my gender difference to hold me back, or think of it just from the perspective of, oh my God, where are all the other women in this course? So, I mean, there were a few. So I just had to sort of adapt to that. Also, one other thing that really, really helped me is, instead of being intimidated by them being very, very smart, I said, what can I learn from them? How can I team up with them? And that was extraordinary. Like, they were incredible resources to brainstorm, to talk about homework, to, all sorts of things. So that's what I did. And then, I've gained their respect. I became one of them. So there was, nothing holding me back. I think there are things that schools can do to help facilitate this, help women feel more comfortable in this space. But I think a lot can be done internally, and how you view your situation.
Yeah. And I'd agree there. I think that confidence piece, and as you said, at the end of the day, they're just people in our own heads. And I know what I'm like, and I'm sure many of the women that I've spoke to, we always overthink, and we can sometimes think that we're not good enough to be in the space that we should be, or the room or the seat that we're supposed to have, when actually, if you can get over that imposter syndrome, or really work on that nagging person that's always telling you you're not meant to be here, and have that support around you, it's really great to hear that, you became part of that room. And it sounds like you had some really forward thinking male companions that were part of that course, that obviously probably realized that as well, and helped you on that journey. And obviously the career that you've had so far in your 14 years within the tech sector. So with that in mind, then, obviously you've worked in tech now for 14 years. You've studied engineering, like you said, for nearly 20 years. It would be really great to hear your journey, because I'm sure people listening don't really understand what your journey is unless they know you on LinkedIn, or they've checked your LinkedIn profile out. So it would be really interesting to hear what that journey has been from software engineer to engineering manager, which, if we look at the women in tech in those leadership roles, those numbers ever dwindle more and more. So it would be great to hear that journey and hear the story that you've been on along that way.
Sure. Back to college years, right? After my college years, I applied for a job in Romania, and I worked there, and somehow I got a job offer from Google. I mean, I applied for it, obviously, but I didn't really think I was going to get it. Like, I was a junior out of college. What did I know, right? Anyway, turns out I got this job offer, and I moved to California to work for Google. Again, a year out of college. And it was, a huge change, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with my career. I just thought I'd be an idiot to say no to Google. Like, the Google experience was very formative for me, because that's where I learned that I'm really passionate about leadership, and that's where I became a tech lead. Also at Google, after I became a tech lead, I became a tech lead manager. So I was kind of having this hybrid role of tech leadership plus engineering manager. And I loved it. It was a great combination of still doing very hands-on technical stuff and people development.
Right.
So I was at Google for 5 years. Then when I switched to Uber, unfortunately, they didn't have a tech lead manager role. They didn't have this role at all. Like they either had tech leads or engineering managers. So I went back to tech lead because I didn't feel ready to fully switch to engineering manager. And I was a tech lead. Then I took time off after Uber after 3.5 years to focus on recovery from burnout and also my coaching and my writing. And then when I joined the early stage startup that you were mentioning called Mnemonic, I joined as a staff software engineer and then I converted to engineering manager. So my path was not like a straightforward line, and it took time for me to fully kind of embrace the engineering manager role, which is my main passion right now.
I mean, what a journey, coming out of university with your degree in the top 3% in Romania, taking that job, moving to the US on the West Coast, which is completely, I'm assuming, different culture, different way of life. I'm assuming leaving family, friends, everything behind to go and work for Google. And then being at Google for that amount of time and moving to Uber, what a journey that you've had. And now being a startup and building that engineering team from the ground, it sounds like a fantastic journey, and one that hopefully for anybody listening is something that inspires them to realize that the journey can be difficult at times, but it's definitely achievable and rewarding as well. And, we're going to come on to some of your coaching and other bits and pieces that you do shortly. But for me, I think, congratulations to you. I think that's an amazing journey and something that, you should be immensely proud of in terms of what you've achieved in those 14 years, which sounds like a long time, but it's actually not that long. So be interesting to see where you are within the next 10 years or even 14 years from now, and the amazing things that you're going to go on and achieve.
Thank you so much.
I think in terms of the next question would be, you've obviously experienced life in the corporate world and you've worked at some of the biggest places for software engineers where they would potentially want to work or would have wanted to work in the past. And obviously the startup phase and the startup community is becoming ever more prevalent now for lots of people. Is there one bit of advice or some advice that you would give to other women that are treading that path and going on that journey that you could share that could maybe help someone who's struggling right now? You mentioned burnout, it is a real thing. And I think people from all types of industries can face burnout. I don't think they really realise that they're in that burnout phase until you come out the other end sometimes. But yeah, what advice would you share for those that are maybe in that early phase? They've been in a company for 3 years and they're a bit lost. Yeah, what advice would you give?
2 things. Number one is something that I didn't think like this about it when I started my career, and that is building your confidence. So I think a lot of us are kind of waiting for that point in our lives where we're going to finally be confident. And now the way I see it is actually you can build your confidence intentionally. And the way you do it is through incremental steps, taking incremental risk, consistency, courage, knowing yourself, set of values, of core values that guide you. I think this is highly important because I didn't realize, but the more ambitious you are, the more confidence you need. Like you're going to achieve a milestone and you're going to be okay, you're good. But then the next time you want to go to the next level, you're going to be again, oh my God, is this for me? Can I even do this? Like you just have to go through the motions again, and you don't have to. If you take the steps to build your confidence, confidence is not going to show up overnight. I actually have an article planned which will come up in a month or so, about a confidence portfolio that I created with things that help me feel more confident in general. And I always go back to it when I need it the most. I think it's very important to have a strong mindset, one that basically tells you that you can do it, instead of reprogramming that nagging voice and replacing it with believing in yourself, despite roadblocks, despite setbacks, despite whatever else everybody else thinks of you. that is also a muscle that can be built over time with consistency and in a deliberate way.
Yeah.
The other thing is not letting your otherness set you back. I loved Michelle Obama's last book. I don't know if you've seen it, The Light We Carry, where he said, take your otherness and make it your superpower. So I just love that. I'm like, oh, okay. And it's a fantastic book. Highly, highly recommend. Like, you have something that others don't. And the sooner you find that and use it to your advantage, the better you are off. And then lastly, don't do it alone. I've talked to so many successful people, both men and women, various levels. Nobody did it alone. Everybody got help at different stages in their career, earlier, later. And this help came in different forms. It could come from great managers, great peers, great mentors, great friends even, great networks. But everybody has some credit to give to someone. Nobody ever achieved anything alone. And so this feeds into the next thing, which is what happened to me. I had mentors, but I didn't always have mentors. Like, these resources are not always available where you work. And then what do? Do you let that hold you back? And the answer is no. Like, you can actually think outside of your job. Yeah. And you can find mentors and coaches to help you with whatever skill you want to develop. And you can have multiple coaches on different things, which is pretty incredible. But that requires investing in yourself, being willing to invest in yourself and not waiting for other people to come and help you. You go get help. Yeah. I think that's pretty much, I can talk a lot about it.
There's such great advice in a lot of what you've shared, that confidence build and constantly thinking. And I think it's relevant for all levels of life, man, woman, children, adults. My daughter's 11, and one of the things that I'm constantly working with her on is building her confidence. She's so hard on herself. And I think if I look back, that's how I was as a younger child. Even still now, confidence is something I constantly try to work on and building it. And, I love the fact that you mentioned that Michelle Obama quote. I feel like I need to go and get the book now and read it, because I've not read it, or get it on Audible. But find your otherness. What is your superpower that then gives you that confidence? It's, when you say it, it's actually quite an obvious thing, but until you hear it, it's actually something that you wouldn't think about, because most people would think that their otherness, their thing that makes them unique, is the thing that would stop you from being confident or stop you from achieving. So there's some really great tips there. But I do like the bit that you mentioned towards the end, which I thought was really interesting, is that piece around the importance of personal investment and obviously the role of a coach and a mentor. I'm a big believer in coaches and mentors. It's something that I have throughout my career been really fortunate to be able to find different people to help me with different challenges, to help me achieve whatever it was that I was trying to get to. And I've been really fortunate at those different points to be able to, like you said, to find that person. And it doesn't have to be someone in your place of work. It could be someone that you meet through many different avenues. But it would be really great to hear your perspective on what you mean by having a coach and a mentor, and maybe how you had picked coaches or mentors along your journey and the lessons that you learned from your own personal experiences. If this is something you wouldn't mind sharing, maybe one or two examples.
Yeah, totally. So finding coaches and mentors. So let's talk about that first, just the process of it. I think many people don't know, but their companies sometimes offer subsidized continuous education. So these are funds that you can actually use and get a coach, and the company just pays for you. Secondly, to find a coach, I think it requires a little bit of dating around. I think a lot of coaches have free introductory calls. Yeah. They have free introductory calls, so you can see their philosophy, you can see their style, their approach, see if you vibe with them, right? That's how I found my coach, actually. This was many years ago, like 3 years ago, when I was just Googling coaches for women in tech. Literally, that's what I Googled. And then I found Prasha Dutra is my coach that I've been working with this year. And I started following her 3 years ago on Instagram. And then I only started working with her this year. but I got to know her on social media. But I saw that we fundamentally align on principle levels, like consistency and courage, and just her approach was very down to earth, which is something that resonated with me a lot. I can see how the process can be overwhelming though, and it doesn't have to be. Like, you can do what I did, right? You can go Google coaches for blah blah blah, but there are also platforms that connect coaches/mentors with people. I'm actually a mentor on Toledo.com.
Okay.
And there's another platform for coaches that my friends have been using called Better Up. There are tons of resources out there. I think it just starts with the willingness to spend money on yourself, on building yourself, on building your skills, on getting the support you need. And there's no shame about that. It's like you're getting continuous education. You're just continuously investing in yourself. I think there's a little bit of sometimes shame associated with spending that much money on yourself, but I feel like that's something, a thing of the past, and we should feel amazing to spend money on building ourselves.
I'd completely agree there.
And I think the other question that you asked about was learnings from my own coaching experience, or from working with my coach. I think the biggest transformation that I've seen for myself after working with Prasha was I started as being a very ambitious, big goals, overwhelmed person that wasn't doing anything towards their goals, to now I'm calm. I've made so much progress on my goals. I'm more confident. I've gotten accountability. I was able to come up with a plan and execute on the plan. And just, I feel like for me, the feeling of not being overwhelmed and actually making progress towards my dreams was the biggest. So highly recommend it. The results are tenfold, I think.
Brilliant. And I think you're right. I think sometimes we forget that in order to improve ourselves, that we have to stop and we have to have that willingness to research, invest, take time. It's a bit like anything. If you want to, I don't know, if you're a weightlifter or something, like, you're going to have to invest in someone to help you to get to where you need to be. What if you think about other sports or anything else like that? So actually, sometimes when we look back and you think about your career, I don't know, I know I had this mindset, well, it will just come when I get to that point, when I hit the criteria, when I tick all the boxes, it's going to happen for me. Whereas actually, to elevate that and kind of expedite it, going out and seeking that help from people who have either done what it is that you're trying to achieve or can support you on that journey is so important. And I think it's something that sometimes overlooked, and agreed, something that people just don't share, because it's this element of shame or embarrassment that you've had someone to help you achieve whatever it was that you were trying to get to. And I think, you know, the world is changing, and it's great to see that actually people are proud to say, this is how I went on my journey, and these are the people that have helped me achieve that, and this is what I invested my own time in to make that happen. So thank you very much for sharing that, and hopefully it's something that others might find beneficial. And I think after this call, I need to get some of those sites that you mentioned, and we can share it on the podcast links afterwards, so others can kind of jump on there and have a look if they're looking for a coach as to ways that they can find one, should their workplace not offer something like this. But on the topic of coaching, obviously at the start, on the introduction, I shared all of the bits and pieces that you do. You're one very busy woman, I know that for sure. But obviously coaching services and coaching others is something that you do and is a service that you offer. So it would be interesting to know a little bit more about this, and how do you act as a coach for other people? How do people find you, and what is it that you could help others with?
Yeah, I am very passionate about coaching. I can talk about this for hours. I think for me personally is that I've learned since I was a TA in college, I get tremendous satisfaction when I can help someone do something that they didn't think they could. And I think it's an extraordinary feeling when someone that I helped is successful because of something that I enabled in them, or this little thing. Like, they did all the work, but it's just like a little piece of the puzzle that I could help complete the big puzzle. Especially when it's about women conquering fears, or trailblazers, or high achievers. I love coaching, and I truly feel like it's part of my life purpose, one way or another. Yeah, and I think the way people find me right now is through word of mouth, but I'm actually about to launch my website.
Wow.
That is coming up soon. So people will just be able to find me. But other than that, LinkedIn, word of mouth, things like that.
Yeah. And I think you're being a bit modest there. That's the only way they can find you. I know that you also have a really great newsletter that comes out and shares many topics on different things. So you've got the newsletter, Musings of a Caring Techie. So yeah, tell us a bit more about this newsletter. Who is it aimed at and what's it all about?
Yes, correct. I forgot about the newsletter. So the newsletter is essentially, it's mainly aimed for people working in tech, engineers and engineering leaders, but not limited to. I think a lot of the articles there can be applied to other industries. The purpose of the newsletter is mainly educational, and it's for anybody who wants to build their interpersonal skills, their leadership skills, grow their career, or want to figure out their next career steps. I like to think of myself as a coach in a pocket. So that's the goal of the newsletter. I talk about things I learned over time, things I've seen in my coaching clients, patterns. The subject range from communication, feedback, psychological safety, mental health in the tech space, burnout, leadership.
Yeah.
And I think what I care most about is having real conversations about real pain points that I feel like we don't talk enough of. So for example, I wrote a series on burnout, and at the time, burnout wasn't like, I've gotten feedback from people, thank you for saying these things I didn't know. Nobody told me. I was burned out for so long already. Yeah, that's what I care about, talking the real stuff and trying to address the real problems.
I read the burnout series, actually. One thing I would say, it is very real. It enables you to kind of realize things that maybe you didn't think was burnout. And even when I was reading it, I was like, oh, okay, maybe at that point it was burnout that maybe I was facing at one point, having come, I've worked in my industry sector for 18 years, held quite high profile jobs. And when you're in it, it's very hard to kind of look up and realize the environment that you're in or the situation that you're in at that time. So for anybody that's listening, I think the burnout series for me was a great one to read through, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'm not an engineering leader. I don't work in engineering. I place engineers into tech companies, but I found it really impactful and useful from a completely different sector. So I think it's something that many people could get a lot of context from. So thank you for that. And then we're coming towards the end of the series. It feels like time's gone really quick, but I don't think it has. But if you was to look back on your career that you've had so far, is there anything that you would you tell your younger self about your career journey? If there was one thing or multiple things that you would tell yourself sitting in the seat that you are today, what would that be?
It's funny you asked that because it's one of the articles that I have coming up. I want to write about lessons for my younger self.
Yeah.
And what I would tell my younger self is the following. Hang in there, stay focused, build your confidence, and aim higher.
Perfect.
Your career journey will not be linear, and you'll learn to appreciate the lows as much as the highs, but you're going to be okay.
Yeah, definitely get through it. I love that. And I think, some of the stuff that we've spoken about today, it's not going to be linear, but seeking that help, that mentor, that coach, investing in yourself if you've got an important goal that you're going for, are definitely all things that can help when you're at that point. So I think that's some great tips and advice. If we could ever go back in time and go again, I think I'd take some of that on board myself, if I'm perfectly honest with you. But yeah, other than that, I don't have any other questions for you today, and it's been amazing having you on the show. So thank you very much for your time that you've given us. We'll share ways that people can connect with you. And obviously you mentioned already LinkedIn. There's the newsletter that you've got your website coming out. So once we've got that, we can add that onto the details of the podcast as well at a future date, so people can always get in contact with you. But I don't know, any other ways that people can get hold of you, or any final tips that you would like to share with the audience before we wrap up?
It was a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much. Same with the newsletter. If my story can help or inspire one single individual, then I'll say all my struggles were worth it. So again, thank you so much for having me today.
Perfect. No worries. And thank you for coming on, and looking forward to seeing what happens next. The new website launch, that was something new I wasn't aware of until today. So that's a nice new one to add in, and all the best with building out your team, Mnemonic as well. And yeah, wish you all the best for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.